Hey folks, welcome to another week. We are now really moving our way through the semester. That does mean, bear in mind that you've got another paper that's about to be assigned, so keep an eye out for that assignment on the assignments pane of Blackboard. For now, we're going to talk about our new philosopher for the week, whose name is David Hume. He is a Scottish philosopher. He is, unlike Berkeley, not a bishop, but interested in very similar things. Remember, Berkeley was interested in sort of two main things, epistemology and religion. Hume really is too, though he's also very incredibly prolific on a whole range of subjects. He wrote hundreds of small essays on everything from whether it's okay to commit suicide to sort of food and cooking, things like that. He was a real Renaissance man. And one of his tasks is to connect everything to what he calls the science of man. He thinks ultimately everything that matters generally matters to us for some reason. If it matters just sort of abstractly, he doesn't really know what that means. He wants to talk about a few things in the text we're reading for today. It's called the Enquiry Concerning Human Understanding, so you might think that he's following up on Locke's and Berkeley's projects, and you'd be right if you thought that. So he wants to talk about what ideas are and how they relate to our perception, and so here's what he thinks. He says that remembering or thinking about something is never as vivid as actually experiencing it. And this seems right. So think about tasting an apple. Just imagine what it's like to taste an apple. You probably have a pretty good idea. I'm sure you've eaten a lot of apples in your lifetime. Now, go actually eat one. And you notice that the imaginary taste of the apple really wasn't all that close to the actual taste of an apple, right? You can think about it pretty well. But it's never going to be anything like the actual experience of tasting an apple, right? It's sort of vague, it's fuzzy, it's in the background. The actual taste is much more clear. So Hume says, well, maybe our minds aren't as possible as we might think then, if we can't actually call up ideas and reflect on them as perfectly as Berkeley might want to say. And though Hume is going to agree with Berkeley that we can't invent new ideas, new simple ideas, that's also, though, another suggestion that our minds aren't all that powerful. They're not really as amazing, as magical, as powerful as we might want to think. And he's going to say, as a result, we can be sure that all of our ideas are copies of our impressions. And by impressions, he means sense data. And he has two ways to prove this. The first way is we know that all of our simple ideas come from our senses. This is the same sort of thing that Locke and Berkeley will agree with. The second one is, if we don't have a relevant sense, so say if you're blind, you're never going to have ideas about things that pertain to your sense impressions. A blind person will have no idea what red is. You can't describe it, you can't give them a sense of it based on what it's like to hear things, right? You're never going to experience red if you don't have the sense of sight. He says, on this basis, that must mean all of our ideas are copies of some impression. You notice that we've changed the background color of the slide. There's a good reason for this. Hume's going to give one possible really interesting counterexample called the missing shade of blue. This is a really famous example in philosophy. So maybe he's going to say we can sort of invent colors. So look at the little spectrum we've got in the middle of the screen. It's a gradual progression from a lighter color of blue to a darker color of blue. And you'll notice that the first three and the second three are separated by more than each color immediately next to one another. There's a missing shade in the middle that would fill out this spectrum. And Hume's going to say, well, if you look at this, you've probably never seen that exact shade of blue in your life. You've never had an actual sense experience of it. But, right, you can look at the one on the left and look at the one on the right, and you can figure out if I get a little darker than the one and a little lighter than the other, I can figure out exactly what that missing shade of blue is going to look like, right? You're probably picturing it right now. So, it ends up that based on other sense data, not sense data of that particular simple idea, but based on some different sense data of these other shades, we can actually get a different simple idea. This is sort of revolutionary. But we do know, right, that idea, we're not entirely sure what it would be like to see that shade of blue, right? We could see it much more clearly if it were actually there. So we do still know that our ideas are naturally pretty faint, pretty obscure, and our sense impressions, by contrast, are very clear and vivid, right? You're much less certain about that missing shade of blue than you are the ones to the left or to the right of it. So Hume is worried. Here's his project. He's worried about the number of bullshit ideas in philosophy and in daily life. And so here's how he thinks we need to weed out the bad ones. He says, when we entertain, therefore, any suspicion that a philosophical term is employed without any meaning or idea, as is but too frequent, we need but inquire from what impression is that supposed idea derived. So because all of our ideas, he says, must come from impressions, either directly or indirectly, then if we think an idea is bullshit, we can prove that it is by showing that it doesn't come from any particular sense impression. If you're not sure, we need to go and just look for the impression, and if there isn't one, it's probably not real, it's probably shady.